Grace, mercy, and peace to you from God our Father and from Jesus Christ our Lord. This is the day that the Lord has made. We are glad and we're rejoicing in it. It is a very good day to be alive. It is a good day to be in Formation Saturday with each and every one of you. This is something that we started a while ago to facilitate conversations with other faith leaders around subjects that we believe will be a blessing and an encouragement to you as you develop your walk with God. I feel like this is a time of impartation, a time to sit with me and people that I respect and people that I honor and eavesdrop on our conversations around different subjects. And so I'm grateful to God to have with me today in conversation, dear friend of mine, senior pastor of the Greater Thankful Church in Anniston, the president of the Northeast Convention, the Northeast wing of the Alabama State Convention, um, my friend, my brother, Pastor Tramaine Solomon. He's a great pastor, great preacher, itinerant preacher, student of the scriptures, and I am grateful that he took the time to sit with us, to have conversation with us. And I don't want to delay the time at all. I want us to jump right into this conversation on developing and maintaining one's devotional life with a specific bent towards preachers, preaching and preachers, and those who engage in pastoral ministry. Eavesdrop on this conversation, if you will. I look forward to uh, hearing what Pastor Solomon has to share with us on today. Let's go into the conversation now. It is an absolute joy to have my friend, my brother, Pastor Tramaine Solomon, Mr. President, with us uh, for this Saturday's edition of Formation Saturday. How are you doing, Pastor Saul?
Man, I'm doing well, my brother. Just glad to be invited to share with you what a gift and jewel you are to the body of Christ, not only just to your church and that community, but to all of the brethren and abroad. Man, you are sincerely and authentically an inspiration of being studious to the Word of God.
I am so excited. You getting ready for installation, right?
Yes, getting ready to be installed September the 14th at the
Wow,
Greater Thankful Baptist Church here in Anniston, Alabama.
that is awesome. Follow. What is that like following a friend?
Um, it's been a blessing so far. The thing is, it's weird because we made kind of a pact to a degree where um, there were certain things I didn't ask about because I wanted to have my own perception of
Mhm.
getting to know people for myself. But
That's right.
also, there's been some things that he's been at because of my relationship with him, and I'm on the church. So my relationship, very thankful, goes back to our pastor emeritus, actually, the Reverend Dr. P.Q. English, who served at church for 45 years, and then of course our friend and brother Pastor Byron Jackson was there for 10 years. So I am the first pastor that church is called outside of that church in 55 years.
Oh wow.
Pastor English and Pastor Jackson were born and raised members of Greater
Wow.
Baptist Church. And so I'm the first pastor outside of that church's arms in 55 years. And so I started preaching for Greater Thankful probably the latter part of Pastor English's tenure. I think I may have did his last two revivals,
Yeah.
Pastor. And then I preached um, throughout the years that Pastor Jackson was there, probably at least
Mm.
once a year,
Yeah.
not ever knowing that this would come.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So
Wow.
it's been interesting. We are familiar with each other. As
Mm-hmm.
as I told them as many times, my first Sunday, I said, "Listen, I'm here today, not as your guest evangelist, not as your guest annual day speaker, but I'm here now as your pastor elect." And so
Yeah.
we were familiar with each other, but now we're getting to really know each other. So
That's
it's,
right.
it's been a joy so far.
That's right. And you and your wife got married here in Columbus, right?
Yes, we got married in Columbus at the 4th Street Baptist Church. where Pastor Johnny Flakes III, our friend and brother, is the pastor. That's interesting because I'm from Albany, Georgia, which is right down the road from Columbus. And
That's
my
right.
wife is from Lafayette, which is not far from Columbus as well. And
That's right.
so we chose Columbus because it was kind of like a middle place for our families.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
would come, and we wanted a church wedding, and so um, uh, just trying to find a layout of the land. My dear friend Pastor LaCoya Day is the one who said, "Hey, you ought to call Flakes." And so
Yeah.
we talked to Flakes, and he was like, "Man, y'all come on." And so we were so blessed that they extended their doors to us, and even that goes back because um, Flakes, Daddy Flakes, or Pastor Flakes Jr. used to preach revival at my home church when I was growing up as a boy,
Wow.
and it was my task as a young adolescent, preteen, teenager to take care of the preacher when they would come. I would wait on them hand and foot. And when it was time for them to go to the sanctuary, I would knock on the office door and say, it's time. And I would lead them to the sanctuary. So it's just so many weird connections, how that came together. Because
Yeah.
Pastor Flakes Jr. was someone who I've always admired from the time I was a boy growing up in Albany.
Yeah. That's wonderful. His Pastor Flakes was just over with us in revival, and
Yeah,
our great friend, Pastor Day.
yeah. Pastor David, good brother. Uh,
Nothing bad to say about Day.
yeah. Him and then also Pastor Corey Neal's another good friend of mine as well. So
Pastor Neil was with us in revival
yeah,
uh, as well. So all great connections. So let's get into this conversation. I want us to talk around developing, maintaining a devotional life. Um, my preaching area for the next 2 months, I'm preaching through the model prayer of Jesus from Matthew chapter
oh,
6.
that's
So,
good. That's good.
I'm my goal is to take it line by line by line by line,
Okay.
and by now, we matter of fact, tomorrow I am doing Thy Will Be Done. Tomorrow
Mm,
I'm doing Thy Will Be Done. So I wanted to have a conversation with a person that I admire their devotional life,
no.
and I think can bring some insight to developing and maintaining it. So, opening question here:
Okay.
what does a healthy devotional life actually look like? I think we that might be a good place to start.
Um, I think there's no cookie cutter for everybody.
Yeah,
I do believe a healthy devotional life, meaning not just spending time reading books, but spending time in the Word. Spending time not only in the Word, but also allowing, after you're reading the Word, spend time in prayer. But then don't just get up, but allow God to spend time talking to you. So I think there ought to be some times of studying, reading the Scripture, not for sermonic purposes, but just for your own spiritual journey. I think you ought
mm-hmm.
to spend time in conversation with God in prayer. But then I think there ought to be some time where you allow to meditate and you allow God to talk to you. Meditation for me is simply medicine for the mind. It's how I look at it. Is that I'm sitting in stillness and I'm allowing God to talk to me, talk to my heart. I'm being vulnerable with God. So for me, taking off all of the mask, all of the titles, and just being Tramaine. I'm just being open to God because I can't hide from Him.
That's right.
He knows everything about me, the good, the bad, all of that, and just having open conversation with God. And I'll say I have grown to that over the years. It has not. It doesn't something that just kind of happens. You just say I'm gonna start today, but you got to grow to what fits to you. If I could, I'm gonna tell you someone and they now rest in the arms of the Lord. My father, the late Reverend Dr. Edmund Howard Solomon, had an impeccable devotional life. From the time I could remember, my dad would meet God at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
If you happen to wake up as a kid and you heard someone walking the hallway, it was my dad leaving their bedroom, going to his study, to talk with God. And he would get upset with himself if he overslept because he said, I told God I'll meet him at 3. And so in that he would have this index
Woo-wee.
system where he would write down prayer requests that people had given him. And he would write scriptures to go along with them. And he would have them posted on the wall and or whatever. And he would pray for us as family, pray for friends and members. He had a remarkable devotional life. If I could get to that, as dedicated as he was, um, that's the goal for me. Be as dedicated as my father was. Now, for me, my time is more late at night, when my house is still. So it could be considered early morning because sometimes it's after midnight is when I find myself being more focused without any distractions. So I think those are the things that make spending time in the Word, spending time talking to God, but then allowing God to talk back to you because that meditation is medicine for the mind.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh, that was so rich. That was too rich.
Yeah.
That was my first time hearing that story about your dad. That is, oh man.
Yeah.
Oh man. That's huge. So
Man, I could even take it a step further, man. And when I'll let you to the next question, but there was a period before my dad started preaching, he was a deacon. And so this walk, when he renewed his commitment to salvation of God coming out of the military, he was serious. And not with just him and my mom. There was a time at our home church, Mount Calvary Church in Albany, Georgia. Our church was shifting. I remember this. I was probably like a preteen. My dad had become, after being a young deacon, still young, he became chairman of the deacon board like 35. We had a new pastor. Our pastor, his wife, my dad, my mom, and maybe 3 or 4 others would go to the church room at 3 a.m. and pray. They did that for 7 years.
For 7 years.
To pray because there was such a shift that the older people and the old guard was fighting against these new couples that were coming and serving. It's that tension that we want to grow,
Yeah.
but we don't want to let go some things.
Yeah.
And so the fight like that, our pastor, I'll never forget it. He called a group together, and they would pray. They would go to the church every day for at least, I want to say it was 7 years. I know a minimum of 5, and they would go and pray at 3 a.m. in the church.
Wow.
And now that I look back on it, I can see things beginning to shift in that church because of the power of their prayer life and their devotional life.
That sets up this question. So we have spending time in the Word, spending time in prayer, spending time in meditation, the ministry and medicine for the mind. How do we start assessing that this is, because you kind of just said it, how can we tell that it's actually working, that is really contributing to our growth? You just said that looking back, you can see how they're spending that time in prayer over those years was affecting the life of that church. What are some markers we could start looking for?
Well, for me, Pastor, it has always been whatever I'm asking God for or God to do, there starts becoming things that are signs of confirmation. I'll give an example. I was at Spring Hill for 14 years, 11 months, and 3 weeks. When the opportunity presented itself about where you're thankful, I've never been as gun ho as some people just to make a move, just to say I made a move.
That's
I've
right.
always tried to be prayerful and thoughtful because something my mentor Frank Kennedy would always say is that every situation may not be your situation, and a church could be bigger, but it doesn't mean it's a better church. I say that, so I started praying and talking to my wife. We're praying. I started trying to find every excuse because we all know when you've been somewhere long enough, you become you are the pastor. Right? I mean, there's nothing. You have enough leadership credibility with those people that whatever you say, pretty much, they're not going to, because they see that they've seen the God in you. They trusted your leadership. And one of my mentors, who's a family friend, Dr. Larry West, pastors of Mount Airy Church in Washington, D.C. I called to talk to him. He said, Tramaine, you got to pray a prayer that says that God, don't let me make the decision. You make the decision and make it clear. So with that being said, every doubt that I had or was going to use to say no, God instantly started removing when I started praying that prayer. And so for me, I think God gives us signs of confirmation when you know that your spiritual life is growing, is helping you. Also, I think you can see it in how you handle situations. When I'm spending time in my devotional life, I see it in not only signs of confirmation, I see it in how I handle situations, how I respond to certain situations. But then I see it as a preacher pastor also come out in my preaching and in my teaching. Because no matter how much I'm a manuscript preacher, no matter how much I write and type, there will be sometimes, because of my time in devotion with God, that God would interject in the sermonic moment that ain't on my paper, that ain't on my tablet. It came from what I've been reading and studying devotionally. So I think God really shows us in a range of different ways how whatever we're doing for development, I think it has no choice but to come out in our walk, in our witness, in our work. So I think that's the best way I can answer that.
Yeah. My preaching, my spiritual father, rather, Pastor Dempsey Daniels from Pensacola, used to call that last one preaching from your overflow.
Yeah.
He called it preaching from your overflow, that you filled yourself so full that it kind of just splashes out everywhere.
Because now we've been doing this long enough now. There are times that we may even amaze ourselves some stuff on the spot that we're able to just start addressing. Somebody asks you a question in the middle of Bible study. It could be different from what you're talking about, but you're able to just instantly start going into this. And I think it's because, we've prepared for various things throughout our ministerial journey, but also it's in our own personal development. That the more time we spend with God, the more it becomes evident to the people, to those that we serve. And in the words of Frank Kennedy, a preacher can never be more powerful than their devotional life. That's where the power comes from.
That's right. That well, you done dug the well, Doc.
Yeah.
And the deeper the well, the sweeter the water,
And then we can tell when we hadn't been spending time with God too. If nobody else can tell, we can tell.
That was dry today. Now they were swinging. They were swinging.
But I know I could have done better.
That's right.
I know I didn't give God my all. But here's another tidbit I think that we need to look at in our devotional life. And I realize this the older I get, is that, and I think Gardner Taylor may have said this, is that we must give God a prepared body, a rested body.
Yeah.
So, whatever that looks like, we got to learn to take intentional breaks to rest. About a month ago, we did a family vacation with my wife's side of the family in Jamaica, and while we were having fun, but I still had my books with me, and not books for studying for preparation to preach, but just books for studying for my own spiritual development and devotional life.
That's right.
That I had a moment when there were limited distractions that I could just spend time with nature, those books, and God.
Oh man. One of the most profound moments of my walk with God was the first time I went on a cruise ship. I was reading. I wasn't even reading a Christian related book. I was reading Leading Change by John Cartier.
Yeah, yeah.
And I went out to the back of that boat and I heard the sound of the waters coming from underneath that boat. Man, I cried like a newborn baby.
Yeah, yeah,
It,
yeah.
it you know, in that moment, the Lord was preparing me. I didn't know He was preparing me to come to Columbus,
Wow.
but in that moment, hearing that water, that verse from Revelation, his voice was like the sound of many waters, came alive for me that day. Yeah. So if you had to encourage somebody that's not engaged in a devotional practice currently,
Mhm.
tell us how to start. Where do we begin?
Block off some time in your day that you can devote to just you and God. Whether it's morning, whether it's noonday, whether it's evening, whether it's late night. And I always tell people this is how I admonish or encourage my members when I try to encourage them to develop devotional life. Is to start with at least 15 minutes a day and watch it grow. Now, for preachers, I try to tell them, younger preachers are coming behind us, start with 30 minutes a day and watch it grow. But I think you have to block off a time where it can just be you and God, and you allow that time to be uninterrupted. So that I think that's the first and foremost thing. You got to find a time, however it may be, and communicate that. If you're married, communicate that with your spouse. Whatever. This is going to be my time for me and God, because what happens is this devotional life is going to allow me to become a better husband, better wife, better person, better son, better daughter, whatever it is. This devotional life is about me being transparent and looking in the spiritual mirror of how I can be better. I ain't trying to be better than nobody else. I'm just trying to be better than I was yesterday. I live by this rule too. This old saying, and I'm quite sure you've heard Matt King Carter, the late Matt King Carter, used to say, "You ought to not go to bed as dumb as you were when you woke up." And so I live by that. That every day in that devotional time, when I'm spending time reading and for God, that I want God to enlighten me.
Yeah.
Enlighten me. And I want to be in my devotional time. I want to be empowered. I want to be encouraged, and I want to be enlightened.
Mama.
Yeah.
One of the things, just a hack that I'm using currently in my devotional life, I take a 3-mile walk every morning.
Mm.
I get up about 5:30 and take a 3-mile walk. My Bible app reads the scriptures to me,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'll use the first 15 minutes of my walk to just hear the scriptures.
Yeah.
I'm by myself, no one's with me. I'm in nature, I'm moving, my mind is engaged, and I'm able to hear. And sometimes after I finish listening to the scripture, I won't turn anything else on.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I turn on whatever book I'm listening to, but sometimes I'll just walk and let whatever the scripture said kind of just turn over in my mind.
Yeah.
I
And
can't
then,
tell you how many sermons have been born during those 3 miles.
yeah. And that's good. I'm glad you mentioned that, because even your exercise time could be built into your devotional time.
Yeah.
Since this transition, my schedule's been off, but I used to walk every morning, 30-45 minute walk, and I got to get back to that. And so with that, I would listen. That would be my time to listen to a sermon.
Mm-hmm.
I would find somebody that I want to listen to, see what they preached this week. And it was kind of for me for inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to hear great preaching, or hear what somebody is teaching.
That's right.
So that would kind of be my time as well, on top of what I would do late night. That would be my time, because I always try to strive to listen to others. So because sometimes we got to be preached to.
That's right.
We got to be taught to, because we pour out so much that sometimes we need to be intentional about being poured into.
So I'm go off script here.
Uh-huh.
This is kind of falls in line, but just cause I'm interested. You got 5 days. You got 5 preachers. Who you listening to?
I'm listening to Maurice Watson. I'm listening. Of course, I like to see what Ralph West has preached.
That's right.
I'm listening to Marcus Cosby, and more. I really love Wheeler's worship experience.
I love to see him pastor.
Yes, I love the way he pastors from the pulpit. I'm listening to Frank Kennedy. And then the 5th, sometimes I'm listening to one of my friends. It could be you sometimes. I'm listening to Todd, Cam, Byron, Phillips. But and so that's kind of whatever, because sometimes we'll talk about what we preaching throughout the week or whatever via text, and so I like to hear how it came together for them.
That's right.
So that's kind of it. Yeah.
For me, I am listening. Every week, I'm listening to my pastor Brian Keith Hodges.
Yeah.
I'm gonna listen to Arthur Jackson III.
Yeah.
Is it Arthur Jackson III or Arthur Jackson Jr.?
The 3rd. You're right.
It's the 3rd.
Yeah.
Arthur Jackson, Kerwin B. Lee. I'm listening to William Curtis. I'm listening to oh man, I just lost his name. Bates Memorial.
F.D. Williams.
Yeah, Bruce Williams.
Bruce Williams.
R.A. Williams. I'm listening to Brian Carr. These are people that I listen to every week.
Yeah, and it's hard to limit it to 5.
Yeah,
I like to listen to F. Bruce Williams as well. He has such a different approach to the text.
Oh man,
I like to also William Curtis. Is always a favorite of mine. Man, it's you can go on and on. And for me, it's a lot about what I'm in the mood for. But I'm gonna listen. I let it be known. Most of my friends are Maurice Watson is my favorite preacher.
Doc.
And so I listen to Doc at least once a week just to hear what he's preached.
And just so we don't get in trouble, Danielle Brown and Renita Wing.
Oh yes, that Danielle Brown. I'm gonna tell you. And of course, I love to listen to Gina Stewart.
Yeah, Gina Stewart, Marissa Farrow. It's a whole. I'm
gonna tell you who's another one that does not get a lot, maybe put, but Leslie Callahan.
I gotta check her out.
Out of she's in Philly. Had a chance to meet her years ago at Spiritual Next, hosted by Dr. Clifford Jones in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah,
but she's dynamic as well.
So always listening, and kind of what we just did is really around the question, because the question is, we have a structured devotional time, but then there are times where there are spontaneous moments where God kind of calls for us. I want to speak to you. I want to do something with you. How do you find that balance in your personal devotional time? How does that work for you?
Those spontaneous moments for me a lot of times come when I'm riding. So that's another time where I'm if I'm riding alone, um, and I'm not on the phone. That's another time where I get a lot of more phone calls done sometimes too. Is when I'm driving. But those spontaneous moments, when I like just take if I'm traveling for revival, man. A lot of times, if I'm not talking to somebody, I am listening um, to. I'm meditating on what I've read. I'm listening to different books or scriptures, like as well, um, or I'm listening to sermons, or listening to music that inspires and encourages and enlightens me as well. That just those are times I really like for the Lord to meditate,
Yeah.
speak to me, God. When I'm on this open highway,
Yeah.
and I almost get mad when somebody call and interrupt.
That's right. I can't tell you how many times I've taken a long drive like that with nothing on.
Oh yeah. My
And
wife would call and she said, "You on the phone?" I said, I'm just listening to so and so. I'm just sitting here in
yeah,
silence, driving,
yeah,
just letting the Lord talk back to me." Um, so yeah, so those spontaneous moments, and then even when if something comes to my mind, I try to hurry up and get somewhere where I can write it down or put it
mhm,
in my notes on my
that's
phone.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Now, as a preacher, I
Hmm.
can't tell you how many times nugget of inspiration have just randomly hit me and I just automatically start preaching it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
just
That'll you be like that'll preach right there.
yeah, bro, just out of the blue, just wide open.
Yeah, you just start putting stuff together. You be
That's
like,
right.
I could make this live right here.
It will live. It will- so
I could make this go.
so we got a block of time.
Hmm.
We got a block of time. We can start as small as 15 minutes, 30 minutes, watch it grow.
Yeah.
Um, we can multitask, take the drive,
Hmm.
take your exercise time,
Yeah.
use it as a catalyst for your devotional life. Let's talk about, because it's already come up, but I want us to spend some concentrated time on it. Let's
Hmm.
talk about distractions in our devotional life. You know,
Yeah. So for me in our house, if they know that when so I'm in my home office right now, if the
hmm
door is closed, more than likely I don't want. I'm in deep thought or don't want to be bothered. So I think you got to build those signs with your family, so they understand. I think as you communicate, and this is what you're going to be doing from this to this, I think your family will respect it.
hmm
Especially if you're a preacher pastor and they understand you talk through, because let's be honest, most people don't know what we go through or what we have, all we have to deal with in the course of a day.
hmm
Most people think all you do is prepare to preach
yeah,
from Sunday to Sunday. That's part of it. But there's a
yeah,
whole lot. There's administration. There's a whole lot of things. And in the black church, the black preacher pastor has always had to be a jack of all trades.
that's
He had
right.
to know a little bit about everything because people years ago, the most educated person was the preacher, and so people would ask him about a little bit of everything. And then really, even now that we have more educated parishioners, they still gonna ask you about a little bit about everything
hmm
because they expect you to know.
hmm
And so um, you have to be you have to set up these boundaries so that you can um, be who you need to be in the sermonic moment, but also in your own spiritual walk.
hmm
Um, so you got to communicate that even with church. There used to be a time in Spring Hill, Mondays was my off day.
hmm
So I started talking about that on Wednesday nights in Bible studies. But
hmm
on Mondays, I'm trying to rejuvenate. I'm trying to coming down off Sunday. And so, if
that's right.
that's it's family time, all those kind of things. And over
Mhm.
the years, the more I talked about it, the more members picked up on it and said, well, Pastor, I on Sunday, well, I call you Tuesday because I know Monday's your day.
That's right.
So I think whatever you prioritize, the
Mm.
time frame, and you talk about it, others will begin to respect it. But the moment that we allow them to infringe on our boundaries, because here's the other thing, I used to hate this, and I still do. People like, oh, you got it, Ray. It just come to you natural. No, it doesn't. I got to apply myself to a chair and sit down and listen to God and pray and all this study and all this stuff. It doesn't. For me to do what I do for Sunday or eulogy or whatever Bible study, it takes me applying myself. While you sleeping, I'm studying.
Mm-hmm.
While you doing whatever you do with your family time, I got to do this. And so I got to put in boundaries for my own devotional time. But I want to step a little further. Even as pastors, we got to put in boundaries to protect our family time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when we do those things, that help us structure those devotion times a little better when we have those and communicate those time frames that we're looking at. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. I am learning to create the boundaries. You know,
I'm learning to. What made me become more intentional about that is my wife.
Yeah.
When we dated, she's a very fun loving, like to travel type person.
Mm-hmm.
God sent her to me to help me learn more how to enjoy life outside of ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't do a good job of that beforehand. It was always work. But then also God sending her to me for that. But then also the transitioning with family members I had right behind each other.
Oh man, I remember that season.
Made me understand too that I was doing better at that. But also now it is such a thing that I tell anybody going, even when I went very thankful in the interview process, look, I'm a family man. By default, I'm now the leader of my family. My father is gone. When it comes to my mom, my brother, our family circle, that's first and foremost to me. I make that no bones about that now.
Yeah.
You feel however you want to feel, but I discovered church people are going to see about their family too.
That's right.
And so I push that for them. You know, when they say, "Well, I can't be here because I got to go see your family." Mm-hmm. God created the family before He created the church.
He did do that.
Yeah, and so prioritizing that and setting those boundaries. But it took going through things to be able to do that. So it's still a work in progress.
That's right.
Still a work in progress. So I just say we have to be intentional. That's my new word. We got to be intentional. You know, we're good at saying I'm gonna do this, but to make sure it comes together, we got to be intentional about setting those things up.
That's right.
Respecting those boundaries.
You know, I'm taking notes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about something that, as preacher pastors, we hardly ever really spend time with.
Mm-hmm.
The people may never know it, but we can go through a season of spiritual dryness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, through seasons of spiritual dryness, where even when we're trying to keep the devotional life going, the fire is burning low.
Oh yeah.
So tell us about a time with you experiencing that. Tell us kind of some of your thoughts on how to remedy that, how to deal with that.
So I'll go back to the first time I think I was honest with myself about it, because it had happened, but I never was honest with myself about it until probably it had to be after my father passed.
Mm-hmm.
So I took several weeks out. I was out the pulpit for 4 weeks. He passed the day before we were getting ready to go back into our church. This is during the pandemic. It's 2021.
I remember.
We were getting ready that Easter Sunday to go back into the sanctuary for in-person worship. He passes the day before that, shockingly. I preached that Easter Sunday, and then I was out of the pulpit for about 4 weeks. I think I was away from church for 2 of those weeks, came back the other 2. So you're back in the church, you're head, you're running full steam ahead, you're trying to get the church back on track. We had been doing this pre-recording, all the stuff that we had to do. I hit a wall. I had to be honest with myself and my leaders and say, listen, I need a break. I know I took off when my dad died. I said, but between balancing that, the church, us being back in the sanctuary, us meeting needs of the community because we were such a community-focused church, I need a break because I'm no good to you. And I had to, and I said it to our leadership. Then I said it to our congregation. I said, now listen, you don't see it because you think I just, I've been getting up here. I said, but I've been running on fumes. And there has been times that I wasn't at my best, even in preparation for you all. You didn't know it because you kept coming up saying that word was for me.
That's right.
But it wasn't a word for me. So this, for me, the sermon has to hit me as well as it hits you. I was preaching out of routine.
That's right.
And so I orchestrated where I took 4 weeks, or I was at church. I think 3 out of those 4 weeks, I didn't preach nowhere else. I counseled engagements. I needed a time where I just wanted to be poured into and preached to. And so I brought people in to preach to us for those 4 weeks. And then I became more intentional with that, even going forward, where I would intentionally build in preaching breaks.
Yeah.
And in that, it's just like a basket, like a shooter. My favorite player right now is Steph Curry. Sometimes he goes through shooting slumps.
Yeah.
And Kerr says, people ask him a question, he says, well, he just got to keep shooting. And so he don't change the routine. I still try to go through my devotional process, but then more of it, I'm just saying, okay, I'm spending more time with God in those because I'm not necessarily spending time for preparation to preach. Now I'm spending time for just to be poured into.
That's right.
And so I'm able to now be revived and refreshed, because there are times when we're honest with ourselves. You cannot preach 52 Sundays out of the year.
No.
And not think you're not going to hit a dry spell or a wall. And I think I read an article not long ago where the preacher pastor probably should preach somewhere between 38 to 42 Sundays out of the year if he's going to be fresh. And churches have to understand that too, particularly in the African American context. I think our Caucasian brothers in their churches, they understand it a little more. Our people think if pastor ain't preaching, can't nobody preach.
That's right.
And we do ourselves an injustice when we expect our pastors to be in the pulpit every Sunday. I'm not saying he need to take off all the time. I'm saying there's sometimes he don't need to go preach for nobody. He just needs to rest.
That's right.
So that he can be poured back into. And so in those, and even for me, going and finding conferences or cohorts or fellowships with friends that help bring life back into my spiritual journey.
No.
Sometimes we just need the fellowship.
That's right. That's right into the next question, Doc. Keep going.
Yeah. Sometimes you need to know you're not the only one going and dealing with the same challenges and issues, and that others have been there or dealing with it, and their insight can help you with your journey as well.
One of the things I greatly appreciate about our friendship and relationship is when I was going through a spiritual dry season, we went, sat down, and ate.
Yeah.
And man, I just need you to laugh.
Yeah.
I appreciated the concern of a brother enough to say, hey, I just need you to laugh.
Man, we have to be more intentional with creating times of fellowship as well.
That's right.
Because we need that in this journey. But the preacher pastor is always maneuvering and working under the microscope.
That's right.
People are always watching. My wife used to get it at times when I would say, well, so for me, I'm a social introvert.
You better than me, Doc.
When I'm around people, I would, but I really don't like crowds of people. I don't have to be out and about on every social scene. I don't have to do that. I know because of my role and responsibilities, I have to intermingle with people to a degree, and so I do the best that I can. But for me, I just like to maneuver in the shadows and go about my business because we're always before people.
That's right.
And so I say all the time, my people battery here. That's my people battery getting low, honey.
That's right.
And I tell her that means that you can go to wherever you feel like you want to go, honey. I'm gonna be at the house, or I'm gonna be at the hotel, I'm gonna be wherever. And so sometimes our families like to do a lot. And so where she's from is the area I do a lot of revivals at. And so people like, hey, real, that kind of thing. And even if it's a social thing, I just want to be, I want to be alone. And it's not a bad thing. It's just that I'm always being pulled on.
Yeah.
You know it. You can't even sometimes go to the gas station.
Right.
Whole life story. I just want to pump my gas.
In between the milk and the eggs, having a whole testimony service.
Yeah, and so
I just wanted to get my groceries.
And I know they don't mean no harm, but they don't understand.
That's right.
That, and I think I heard Rob West say this one time about gave an illustration about how the pastor literally is giving a spiritual blood transfusion every Sunday, every time they stand to preach, and so there's a little bit of them dying.
You remember hearing him preach that
to give life, and so that made so much sense to me because if you realize it, man, a lot of times on Sundays you're just drained.
That's right.
You're drained because even after you preach on Sundays, as part of us as being shepherd, we stand and fellowship with the sheep because we do want to hear their struggles. We do need to know what we're praying for them for. Mm-hmm. And so when you finally are done on Sundays or after, you are drained and you want to go recuperate and all of that. And so
I always remind us of that statistic that says that one sermon for about 30 minutes is the equivalent of an 8-hour workday.
Yeah.
Your body has gone through the stress and the strain of an 8-hour workday. And I'm tired. I want to go to sleep.
Yeah.
That's why that Sunday night be so powerful, Doc.
So whatever it takes for you to recharge, during that, you sometimes just got to pull away because we see Jesus do it. Jesus goes to the garden. He leaves at 12, take 3, then he leaves at 3, and he goes a little further by himself. Mm-hmm. So if Jesus saw the need while he was in this physical body to take a break or take a respite, we have to do it. But I think too, in the African American church context, we must understand how important that is in the life of your pastor. If you want your pastor to be healthy, not only physically, but mentally and spiritually, you got to allow him the space to take those moments of rest.
One of the things I thank God for GB for is every quarter I have a week. Every quarter I can take a week. I haven't done that, but it is available to me that every 3 months I can take a week to recharge and reset.
Yeah. And so that was just kind of the same thinking at Spring Hill, and I've adopted that here. Very thankful. Again, we're just getting our feet wet, but coming in the door when we were talking in the beginning, I kind of gave them my methodology behind that is that every quarter I need to reset myself. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot. And so definitely, and I think we cannot be afraid as pastors to have those discussions. We don't have to be Superman.
That's right. And I don't know if it's like this for you, but when I've gone too long without a reset, it's hard to get my thoughts clear.
Right. It's hard to get your thoughts clear, but then I become very irritated.
Oh, Reverend.
Every little thing seems to irritate me more than it would before. And speaking of that, the thoughts, I thought that's where I was at toward the end of last year, as I was discerning what was next for the life of the church. And I thought because I felt like I wasn't hearing God, that it was me just needing a break, but it was really God saying your assignment was up.
Oh wow. Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Which kind of brings me to this next question. So, devotional life and the transitions of life. Devotional life and the crisis of life. You talked a lot about the transition of your dad today, and I'm grateful to have been able to kind of from a distance to watch you. And matter of fact, you even came and talked with us
Yeah.
around the subject of grief during that time.
Yeah.
To watch you through that, and now the transition from one church to the next. How does the consistency of your devotional life help through the transition? What is its role in major life transition in Christ?
That season of grief that I experienced between the transition of my dad, my brother, and my grandmother within a 2-year period increased my devotional life.
Okay.
Or I won't say increased, it deepened my devotional life. And I'm going to tell you why. Because there were moments that I, in the season of grief, and you go through all of these feelings, that you get angry with God. You ask God why. All 3 deaths are unexpected. And so,
and you preached all 3.
Preached all 3 because I'll never forget when we were trying to make arrangements for my dad, and my mom, my brother asked, one of my brothers asked the question, "Who's going to preach?" And my mom said, "Tramaine." He would have it no other way. Okay. For my brother transition, it was Tramaine. My grandmother, I knew.
Yeah.
That's what she would want. So through all of those, to be able to, in those moments, have to be son and now assume the role as pastor of your family. You know how that goes.
Yeah.
My dad transitions. He was the pastor of the family. Now that role shifts to you. And then same with my brother, my grandmother, all of that, and handle their arrangements.
That's right.
So none of that could have been done on my own strength. It took time just being with God and saying, "God, okay, God," and being honest with God how I felt in those moments.
Yeah.
But also understanding, hearing my words of my father, is that you can trust God, and knowing that his faith walked with God. Because I think his eulogistic moment, I talked about Enoch and how he actually, the eulogy was entitled "Edmund Walked with God," because that was his testimony of how he walked with God, as I said earlier in the devotional.
Yeah.
So I have this example before me of someone who never wavered in their faith with God. It told me that if he could do that in the seasons that he lost relative siblings and parents, and he never wavered. And I saw him and my mom model this before us. Then surely I gotta increase and deepen my relationship with God to get that same strength.
That's right.
And so, I was able to trust God in ways that I've never been able to trust him before, and watch God give me the strength in each one of those moments.
That's right.
So through transition of churches where I'm leaving, a group of people who have loved me unconditionally. I went there married, got divorced in year 2. They never said a word, didn't care, just loved me, protected me, God, all of those type things, to being single 10 years, getting remarried, all of this, and just loving me. I said I wouldn't be where I am for God sitting to those people at Spring Hill.
That's right.
But my prayer during that transition was, God, I know how ugly this can become. I've seen when people get hurt or when they get, because most times churches are grieving when you transition, so they get met. Their anger is out of grief. I was intentionally praying in my devotional life that if this is you, God, allow them to understand in the midst of their hurt.
Yeah.
And he honored that, man.
Oh, wow.
When that time came, I was able to have, I'll never forget it. Thankful only brought their 2 top candidates to preach.
Mm-hmm.
I preached. I knew then the word would get out because of close proximity.
Mm-hmm.
I had a funeral that Friday at Spring Hill after I preached there. Thankful that Sunday. And I told my people who knew when I'm away, they knew I was preaching at Thankful. They didn't know what I think in their mind it was just pastors preaching at a station or whatever. So one of my deacons said, Pastor, I heard you leaving us. I said, Deacon, I'm your pastor. I'm still your pastor until that's the only time that changes when I'll tell if something changes, I'll tell you first. Because he was on the search committee when I first came. He was a chair. I honored that when things changed. I went to his house first.
Mm-hmm.
Sat down, deacons and trustees, told them. There were tears that were shed, but they said, Pastor, if you say this is God, we understand and we honor that. Twofold of that prayer. Lord, allow them not to be angry, upset, and bitter, but also allow me to continue to pastor them until the very end. God honored that. I was able to help them set up a process, recommend to them 3 candidates, and they chose one of them. I left on the 4th Sunday of March. It was my last Sunday after giving my 30-day notice. They had a pastor the 4th Sunday in April.
Oh, God, right.
But none of that could have happened, in my humble opinion, if not I had been intentional in my devotional time and prayer life with God and asking God to prepare and condition their hearts if this is you. Because I love them and I genuinely wanted to see them be successful after me. And so none of that, in my opinion, comes without spending that time in consistent devotional life, even in seasons of not knowing what's next.
Yeah.
I've even tried to lead our convention in times of prayer.
Yeah, I've observed that.
21 days in January, 7 days leading up to our session. Because I think we get denominationally, we've gotten where we say we're Christ-centered, but we're more political at times than we are spiritually and God-led. And you cannot, in my humble opinion, do this work on any level without saturating yourself in prayer.
I remember the first time you ran for the presidency,
mm-hmm.
and how that turned out. I preached at Dr. Hunter's church this past month.
Yeah.
And
Trent's a good friend.
Yeah. I was reflecting on how all of that played out. I said, yeah, that's when we learned that Tramaine Solomon was a man.
Yeah. Because you have to understand too, everything we pray for, it may not happen right then.
Yeah.
And so you got to understand God's time. You got to trust God's timing and His process. I'm not an Alabama fan. I'm Georgia all the way through. I know you are, but I've always been a fan of Saban, and he always talks about the process.
Yeah.
The process.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of adapted that for a spiritual sense, that understanding God has a process.
Yeah.
I may not always understand His process at the time, but if I trust God, I got to trust His process.
Mama.
And as I trust God and His process, that I'm reminded what Jeremiah says, He has a plan to prosper us.
Yeah.
And so whatever that may look like, I got to be willing to trust God and living by faith. And that's why there's our theme, moving forward by faith as a convention. Coming out of this pandemic season, because we don't know where God may be leading us, but I gotta trust him enough to trust whatever he says. This is what's next.
That's right.
And I think many of our churches, and even in our personal lives, we are not where we could be because we're too afraid, because we're always trying to plan.
Wow.
And so I believe in this. It's okay to plan. It's okay to strategize. So I have this saying: be prayerful, plan, pray again, but also leave room for God. It's amazing how we try to make a program and say, well, God, this is what God said, but we ain't left no room for God. Because God moves spontaneously sometimes.
That's right.
And what you plan, what you pray about, God may decide to move in a different direction. So you got to be open
That's
to
right.
what God is doing.
Last two questions.
Mm-hmm.
Any resources you want to recommend?
Man, I'm going to tell you a couple devotionals that I've been reading. One for any pastor, I think, and you may have already had this, Leading in Uncharted Territories by the IC3 board.
Oh, yes, sir.
That 33-day journal. I do this at least once a year. I would also say Derek Easter, who's a friend of mine out of Arkansas, and George Parks wrote a devotional several years ago on Matthew 5, on Matthew 5, 6, and 7. They walked through the Sermon on the Mountain, and they call it Mountain Meditations. Mount Meditations. Derek Easter, and he pastors New St. Hurricane Baptist Church in Pine Bluff. Great leadership guru. Me and him met several years ago at Spiritual Mix in Charlotte, and then of course George Parks is one of the premier preachers in our country at the Metropolitan Church. But they wrote this together when he was in Little Rock as well.
That's
called
right.
Mount Meditations. Is another good one. These are two, and there's a lot of devotionals out there, but these are two that I like to have in my repertoire.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to lean more on African American writers. Not saying there's nothing wrong with our Caucasian brothers and sisters, which is good, but I think sometimes we just need to read people who connect with us.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you two other good books that I'm currently reading, because I have this weird reading pattern where I read 3-4 books at a time. But I'm reading Giant Lessons from David by Claiborne Lee. Giant Lessons from David. It's basically a book about leading through success. But then also I just started Grace to Grow by John K. Jenkins, Sr. at First Baptist Glen Arden in Maryland. Grace to Grow, Creating a Healthy Church in Unhealthy Times. And he said something that I just shared with my leaders 2 weeks ago in our leadership meeting, and that it was, ask yourself the question. Ask your church. Your church ought to ask yourself the question: is your church structured to grow? Is it structured for growth, or is it structured for tradition?
Well, man.
Meaning, and he says tradition, meaning that you're just structured to keep doing what you've always been doing. And so the light bulb went off in our leader's head when I asked that question several weeks ago.
I got a chance to sit with Uncle John.
Okay.
In a proclaimer's place.
Gotcha.
With Joel Gregory. And me and him sat together every day. I had Keith Reed on one side and John Jenkins on the other side for 4 days.
Right. You're using Bliss Company, right? You're using Bliss Company.
And John, say it again.
But see, I think this too, before you finish what you're saying. If more guys who are coming behind us will understand the value of investing in your own ministry, whether your church sends you or not, of how that helps your development and your growth. You can't not lead. The old saying is true. Leaders are readers and leaders are goers. You got to be able to go and expand your own capacity so you can come back to your assignment and contextualize it for
That's right.
you. But you got to see what else is out there.
I asked him the question that I'm getting ready to ask you next.
Uh-huh.
And his answer was, remember that your church is full of infants and invalids. All of them are screaming and crapping on themselves.
Wow. Wow. Because he said something in the earlier few pages about how your church vision should be seeped pretty much into, it should be all about developing disciples.
That's right.
And so I was like, wow. So
when he said that to me, and he said, your job is to pat them on the back and to clean their behinds. I said, oh, okay then, Doc. Okay, Uncle John.
See, yeah, but those are kind of a little bit of what I'm reading right now, man. And I think those are good tools that help deepen your devotional life. Also, I always think you ought to read something for some type of, not necessarily spiritually, but something leadership wise as well.
That's right.
Because you should always be trying to develop who you are to be the best that you possibly can.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
My favorite question to ask preachers.
Yes.
I want you to go all the way back to the first day of the first church of your pastoral career.
Gotcha.
I want you to think of everything that you have learned over these years of pastoral ministry. What would you tell yourself today on your first day?
If I could go back to Friendship Atala, 709 Northwest 3rd Street in Atala, Alabama, I would tell myself to be patient. And I would tell myself what I said a little while ago, what I've learned over the ride: trust God in His process.
Yeah.
Sometime as a young preacher pastor, we wanted to come quick.
Yeah.
And soak up the experiences, trust God, trust His process, build relationships with people, and build relationships with colleagues that can last a long time, like what we have and others, and where you may not talk every day.
Yeah.
But when you connect, you just pick up like you never left off. And
That's
let them be genuine, authentic relationships. Not about trying to fit into a crowd so that you can seem to be important or big. God will get you where you need to be in due time.
Yeah.
Just shared that with a young pastor last night.
Yeah.
I said, don't think because you're in a rural area that people in the city got it better than you.
Yeah, Doc.
Sometimes what you have here, if you work it and you are able to bloom where you're planted, God will elevate you where He needs you to be. And so just take pride, enjoy the ride.
That's right.
Enjoy the ride. Be faithful to God and watch God be faithful to you. That's what I would tell my, just be faithful to God.
Along those lines, when I was pastoring in the rural, I was pastoring two small churches. One church only had church one Sunday a month. The other church had 2 Sundays a month. And Tommy Lee Lewis said to me, "Why the Lord got to take you to them? Why can't the Lord bring them to you?" I said, okay.
GWC Richardson told me this once. He said, and God bless his soul and his memory.
Yeah.
He said, develop the office of pastor the way you want the people to see it. If they only see you as a part-time pastor, develop it in such a way that they'll start saying, we got a full-time pastor.
That's right.
And sometimes, this is something else he told me now, and I know we got to go. He says, sometimes the Lord will give you the community before He gives you the church.
Reverend Quentin Earl Hammond said the same thing to me.
And I am a believer. I have been gone from Spring Hill almost 3 months. There's some things going on in that community now. And the people have called me to help them navigate through.
That's right.
Even my successor.
That's right.
We have a relationship.
That's right.
Not try to, he's doing a fabulous job at church, but with some of the community things, because they know God allowed me to have such influence in that community where community leaders and community officials still look to me to help pastor that community almost.
That's right. That's exactly what he said. He said, sometimes the Lord will give you the city, and you may not get the church, but if he give you the city, it's just as good.
Yeah, yeah. And so I I'm at that point now, man. This December will be 20 years of preaching, 19 years of pastoring. And I have an age in my head. I came in the door thankful saying, listen, I got 25 good years left of pastoring. I always preach. I'm back in school trying to finish up the MDiv so I can do some other stuff one day. And still want other areas. I don't want to pastor the church all my life.
That's right.
But I do want to teach. And I have a passion for preachers and pastors. And so I like pouring into others and sharing with others. And so whatever I can do, as I tell these younger guys who come, because I'm realizing now we're becoming the old guys.
What is this?
There was a day when we were the young preachers. Me and OD on Color were talking about this the other day. We ain't the young preachers no more.
Reverend. Dude walked up to me and said, "What's up, Unc?" And I didn't know how to take it.
Right. And so I said, okay, well, I need to, I don't mind sharing my wealth of experience or what I've learned so far, because I'm still learning.
That's right.
But if I can help a younger guy come out and not have some of the bumps and hurdles, as I tell them, always prioritize their families. Listen, I've been blessed with a strong itinerant ministry, but hotels get old after a while. I've seen guys who were on the road who I thought might have had great churches, but because they were on the road so much, they did not have what I thought. So I've always wanted to be what I consider or call a well-rounded pastor.
Yeah, Reverend.
I wanted to build a strong church, to serve God and community. And if God called me to go preach, I will, but I don't depend on that.
That's right.
I depend on building in the assignment that He's given me.
Right.
I tell them, don't get caught up on that, because that time will come and go. And I think Pastor Q.E. Hammond, he makes this post every year about there'll be a time when you get all the calls, there'll be a time you don't get any calls.
That's right.
And if we are truthful with ourselves, after the pandemic, you don't see as many calls as you once did. But cherish the ones that you have. But don't forget that your first calling is to build, if you're pastoring, to build that church.
That's right.
Build those people, rather, who are the church. And so, man, thank you for your time, man. Thank you.
Doc, I appreciate it. I believe that this time is going to be insightful for preacher and parishioner alike. I thank God for your friendship and for your time today.
Same here, my brother, man. Blessings upon you and the Bueller family, all the work that you all are doing.
Yeah, man.
Man, it's amazing what God is doing. And
absolutely,
God got you in the right place, man, at the right time. And so just keep keeping on, as the old preacher would say. Keep on keeping on, Doc.
Absolutely. GB, we look to see you in the morning. We love y'all. Peace.